This video has spoilers for God of War 1, God of War 2, and God of War Chains of Olympus. Can I play those games? Probably should, but they're not available currently. At least God of War 1 and 2 are getting remade at some point in the next 5-7 years, who knows, kind of thing. Chains of Olympus? Probably isn't. But, that's a spoiler warning, for courtesy's sake, just said spoilers for God of War 1, 2, and Chains of Olympus. You cool with that? Alrighty then. Let's go. God of War 3 originally came out 2010 on PlayStation 3, but this video is based off the PlayStation 4 Remastered, came out 2015, and I find it weird that God of War 1 and 2 didn't get remastered on PS5 or anything. Granted, at the time of this video, the God of War Trilogy remake got announced like a week or two ago. But it's just weird to me how this was the only one available on PS4 and PS5 for the longest time. Despite me not playing God of War back in the day, I remember how big this release was. I remember I have relatives who were so excited to play this game. Even one of them who had their copy but couldn't go home yet and decided to just start playing the game's intro bit on my PS3 just because he was so amped up to finally play this game. Because I know that this was a huge, massive deal, finally get the finale of, well, people thought finale of the series, but finale of the Greek era of games. So this one I'm like, okay, I don't want to say it has big shoes to fill, but this one I'm like, damn, once it get people's attention back then. Our main premise is that directly after the God of War 2, Kratos with the Blade of Olympus and the Titans on his side go up to Mount Olympus in order to face Zeus, with the other Olympian gods deciding to support Zeus, with Zeus even noting how the Olympic gods have had a good relationship, but feel they need to band together in order to prevent Zeus from dying, since, according to Athena in God of War 2, the death of Zeus also means the end of the Olympia itself. While I'm going to climb up there and facing off against Poseidon, Gaia has the opportunity to help Kratos, who's about to fall off the mountain, and chooses not to, revealing that the Titans never really wanted Kratos' help. They just wanted to basically use him to free them so they can get revenge, feeling like killing Zeus is a task reserved for the Titans themselves, and not actually something that they want to help Kratos with when it came to the mutual goal of revenge, leaving Kratos to fall off and back into Hades again, having his powers drained again, but this time he still gets to keep the Blade of Olympus, so at least it's not all for naught. And now the Spirit of Athena is there to guide Kratos, actually trying to help Kratos kill Zeus this time around. On the previous title, she was trying to prevent Kratos from killing Zeus. But despite having the Blade of Olympus, which should allow Kratos to kill Zeus, Athena claims it's still not enough, and that Kratos needs to open Pandora's box again, this time revealing that there is a hidden power within it that was not unleashed yet when Kratos used it against Ares in God of War 1. So now the main goal is to find Pandora's box again, so I'll go after Zeus again, making me question, why is she trying to stop Kratos killing Zeus in God of War 2? Apparently, it wasn't enough, so he didn't have the full power. Right off the bat, so much is happening. Even the game starting up with the quote from Plato saying, "Well, judge a man, give him power," and everything. Like, so much stuff is going on, always for things to try to get dialed back. Once the Titans decide to effectively betray Kratos, being blinded by their own revenge, that this mutual ally who could help them in their revenge quest, they decide isn't really worth it because they feel the revenge belongs to them and them alone. There's also destruction of the world being caused as the gods are being defeated, with you be able to see it in real time, seeing the environment, look at all the destruction being caused in Kratos' wake. Granted, Kratos' goal isn't to kill all the gods, just Zeus, but since all the gods basically are banded together in order to stop Kratos, they don't care what he says, move out of the way, I'm not to fight you, this is not about you, because, according to what was said before, destroying Zeus means destroying all of Olympus, so, whether they like it or not, they have to defend Zeus, even if Kratos doesn't really care for most of them and just wants to kill Zeus. But it's clearly Kratos also does not care about the destruction being caused for his revenge mission in the same way as the Titans didn't care how they basically threw away a perfectly good ally to their cause just because they were so sought after their angered revenge. Also, this game does acknowledge the events of Chains of Olympus, with the characters bringing up the stuff Kratos has done during that game. I even like it in the fact that Helios, at first, actually mentions he has a favor that he owes to Kratos, since Kratos helped save them in Chains of Olympus, but when the favor is helping betray Zeus, Helios is like, no, I can't do that for you, sorry, man. Like, at least Kratos tried to be like, oh, can you just help me do this and I could just move on with my life? No. Aww. Overall, I do like the story of God of War 3. I know that it gets a mixed reception, since off the face value when it comes to the events going on, the player is not exactly, or shouldn't be, rooting for Kratos, all the destruction he's leaving in his wake for his revenge mission, in the same way that Zeus has caused so much destruction in his paranoia and fear, in the same way that Titans just caused so many problems because of the fact that they're so one-note in their revenge. I was like, this one moment where Kratos tries to choose this more compassion side, but ends up getting so so filled with rage and he ends up choosing to indulge in his revenge, but the fact that at that moment he had a different idea he wanted to pursue, but someone decided they couldn't keep their mouth shut and pissed off Kratos. Also, this game's narrative gets flagged for the fact that Kratos causes so much destruction, with Kratos being so blinded in his revenge like everybody else that he doesn't care about it, or there being certain scenes that people wish didn't exist in the game that feel needlessly cruel in Kratos' haunted revenge path. But I also talk it up partially to the fact that all these games have such messed up temples and stuff made by the gods or for the gods that require so much sacrifice and needless death or anything. Even stuff they made that was designed to keep something away, and they're like, oh, they don't need access to it, they're gonna send countless humans to their death or to do it. It's one of those things where, yeah, Kratos not a good person. He is far from a good person. But I also focus on everything else the gods have made throughout his entire journey and everything that make me go, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel so angry at Kratos. I'm looking at the bigger picture and seeing how much crud the Olympian gods themselves have been doing, even before Kratos opened Pandora's box in God of War 1. But you know, two wrongs don't make a right and everything. Either way, the point I'm trying to make is, I like the narrative of this game. I still do like Kratos as a protagonist in this game. I just feel like there's certain aspects where Kratos gets judged more harshly than the Olympian gods in this game is going against what they've been doing this whole entire time. But also, Kratos is the main character we're following, so of course, he would have the spotlight shine on him with actions in this game, especially when it goes far beyond the path of reasonable. Then again, considering the Olympian gods already don't like him, I plan to come in God of War 2. I also have to wonder, even Kratos didn't do his revenge quests, what do you really have left under the Olympian gods trying to kill him on every casual Tuesday at that point? Now for the gameplay, continuing the series of combo-based action games, I do like some of the abilities have been retooled. Just the fact that Kratos now has the ability to pull himself towards enemies to make it easier to close the gap. That is super cool as a new mechanic, since I wanted a gap closing ability, and now I finally got one. It also retooled how magic works, where instead of this game, Kratos has multiple weapons he can get, rather than just like the 2 or 3 before, and each weapon has a different spell or ability that Kratos is able to use. So rather than just a pile of magic that to swap between, you switch between the weapons, and then they have the one big AoE magic ability that Kratos uses, which I feel is a pretty good compromise compared to how it was done in the main number games and how it's done in Chains of Olympus. Like, it is more simple, but also more ready to use by the player, on top of expanding the weapons that Kratos gets to be more viable to use than just using the Blades of Exile. I am still using the Blades of Exile. You also get item tools to use when you progress through the game, and these things only have one upgrade, making it easier to upgrade these items, and then just upgrade your main weapons as well, making it just more convenient as well when it comes to that. On top of the fact, these items can be useful in combat, with the way they're used being snappy, like the way Chains of Olympus handles magic. Just hold a button and then press one of the face buttons in order to use one of your little item tools you get with the game, which is super snappy, super cool, helps in combat. I love these changes to combat. They make things way more snappier and fresh. One gripe I do have is not a change in camera. Since we're now in the power of HD, we can now zoom far out in order to show the massive hordes of enemies coming at the player, but it does at moments leave it to where Kratos doesn't stand out on the screen. So despite having your weapons all over the place and going, there can be times where it's like, where'd Kratos go? Where did Kratos go? I can't find him anymore. Granted, I never find it as an issue since I'm getting attacked or anything. Just one of those things that is kind of funny where they zoom out so back that Kratos ends up starting to blend in with the enemies that he's fighting, and it's like, where'd he go? Where'd Kratos go? Do you see him? They also shifted the positions of QTEs. Where QTEs were always these big prompts on the screen, now they're smaller prompts, with there being a white flash on the side of the screen to also indicate what face button they want to push. But the face button icon itself is small, and I know it's there to try and make sure you can see the action what Kratos is doing during the QTE. I also don't like it because it also makes it harder to anticipate what the QTE button to push is, you know? So I get what they're going for, wanting to have more screen real estate to show the action of the QTE, but pressing the QTE is the most important thing. If you don't want the player distracted by QTEs, then you wouldn't have put QTEs to begin with, you know? I do also find the puzzles way more enjoyable here, with them finally adding some things I should have done from the get-go, such as if your dragon item needs to be used for a puzzle, the thing is now on wheels, so it's easier to drag around, right? And you need to push in one direction, pull in one direction, kick it across, make just so much easier to get it done, as opposed to before was just so annoying. And I understand when it's a case of like need to push or pull something what enemies are after you, that's a challenge, but a lot of the time I just push or pull something, and now every object here is on wheels. It's easier for Kratos to just go around and push and pull things when it comes to needing to do puzzles, which I feel really helps. I love this one puzzle segment that requires you to constantly activate this button, and the layout would shift in a way like this dimensional view in order to create a new pathway for Kratos to go through. And that section puzzle, that was super cool to have in the game. There are some segments that, okay, so most of the fact that because the game takes place on Mount Olympus, it's not as big as they make it seem. So remember the fact that there will be instances where Kratos is just going around the place, feels like in circles at times, because the areas he needs to go to for the plot. Even at one point in the game, I was surprised to see I was basically back at the start of the game and being like, oh my god, I'm back here. But the tools you have now allow you to do stuff in that locale that Kratos couldn't do before, which is a cool way of showing progress when you go back to earlier places and do stuff, but it also highlights that this locale doesn't feel as big as it really should be at times, everything. Not helped by the big cube section is what's been dubbed. Whereas one entire section we had to try and put together this one entire little area with these giant like cube boxes or whatever, but you are here for way longer than the player will want to be. Whether it be one segment we had to defend the chain on it from enemies attacking it and breaking it, which will then cause instant game over if it breaks, or there's one segment we have to survive inside one of the cubes for a good while. It's not that long, it's like maybe 5 minutes or less. It's the fact that it's filled with spikes that for some reason instantly kill Kratos, which is what makes it annoying. And while Kratos' attacks have long animations, asking the player to quickly get away from the spike isn't the easiest thing to ask, so it either means the player has to do these short animations that don't attack enemies well, or they're prioritizing getting away from the spikes, and strangely, the spikes do not harm the enemies, it's just the player. So it's just a middle finger to the player, and not an actual environmental hazard the player can take advantage of when it comes to enemies. One thing I also find weird is the fact that the range mirror this time instead has Kratos using the Blade of Olympus, which it's not the fact that it's a range meter mechanic. I feel like that's just like, okay, that's a big all-out mode. What I find weird is when the high up the Blade of Olympus is having the power of a god. In this case, Kratos is all the God of War abilities of Kratos. It's one of those things where as a rage mode thing, I feel like it should be more powerful than it is, you know? Like, this is the main weapon that Kronos trying to use or to go after Zeus with. And I feel like something he doesn't really use in the stories is a rage mode mechanic. In fact, you fight several gods without actually using the Blade of Olympus, and the fact that it's a rage mode meter means it can't be too powerful against enemies, but it also just makes the blade seem not all that powerful, which is just a whole entire weird aspect that the Blade of Olympus feels downplayed, if anything, despite how important the weapon should be. Aside from two of the earlier boss fights in the game, like one with Poseidon against Hades, the boss fights in this game were alright. Like, God of War II with the final boss was a complete chump here, and in here, the final boss, at first I thought was going to be a fun challenge, but once I realized one of the easy attacks to completely parry, it was a chump again, and I was like, oh. So, the boss fights, while they are plentiful, and interestingly, some gods aren't boss fights per se, they still get a boss battle in the way you fight them. It is an interesting choice. It's one of those things where, I don't know, let's end. For a big context finale, the boss fights don't make it feel as climactic as it really should be. At least not gameplay-wise. Visual spectacle, it is there, but it feels like it couldn't really live up more to the whole gameplay aspect when it comes to how the boss fights actually play out, especially the final boss. That is a super cool thing presentation-wise, what they go with it, how they try to finish the game, everything is super cool. But gameplay-wise, he was a complete chump, unfortunately. There was also this brief segment where Kratos does have to escort someone, but interestingly enough, the escort doesn't have an HP bar, so you gotta worry about them taking damage. Although it's gonna worry about them constantly yelling out, help Kratos, help Kratos, Kratos, help, constantly. And all it really does is just make certain puzzles to do now have essentially a time limit, because I need to do the puzzle quickly or the escort will die. So now it's more about just doing the puzzles very quickly, and once again, the character's constantly yelling at you, help Kratos, help. So for the escort mission, doesn't add a whole lot. Could have had a bit more to it. I don't mean give them an HP bar. I just mean could have been a bit longer because it feels so short-lived. And considering the points for the drive home when it comes to narrative aspect, could have had a bit more to it or a bit longer of a segment to really drive home the aspect in the player's mind rather than just in Kratos' mind. Overall, I do greatly enjoy God of War 3. I think it's the best out of the games I've played so far. That's a tough one, really. But overall, I just like the gameplay changes they make to it. I do have the story going on, if I know there are points that don't perfectly land with the execution the writers seem to have when it came to the idea of the story and then the actual final execution, what they're trying to do and everything. But it's also a hard time execution considering the setup you already created in God of War 2. Like I said, you're trying to hold this whole entire thing of Kratos doing these monstrous actions, but considering the situation, what does he honestly have left? Kind of thing. Also the fact of, once again, he does try to just not kill some of the gods, but some gods are like, no, I'm gonna get in your way anyway. Come on, freaking fight me. Everything. So, he does have attempts to try and just not cause more destruction in his war path to go after Zeus. You can also tell with this game's finale, this was also a huge case of, I don't know, they didn't really have an idea to do a God of War afterward. I say that because, just like how the first game's ending feels open and shut, this one also feels open and shut to a certain degree, with even originally being advertised as being the end of God of War, but it wasn't until later on decided, you know what, we still got more in us. Also highlights how, after this game, they made 2 more prequel titles, Gods of Sparta and Ascension and everything. So it really feels like this is supposed to be the end. And if it was the end, honestly, I feel like it was would have been a pretty good send-off to the franchise with how things play out. But obviously, there are plenty more titles still being made. I also did read about David Jaffe's idea of God of War 3's narrative for he wanted to take the game's plot. And also when it comes to his idea, it's one of those things that's like, It's a pretty interesting idea. It's one of those things that concern execution of this game. I'm not sure you could properly execute that idea, but it is an interesting one, with his idea being more on the idea of trying to have humanity lose faith in the gods and everything. So his concepts for God of War 3 is an interesting concept, but that's not the world we live in where we got his concept. What we got here is the one we got here with the big revenge tale and everything, and people being blinded by anger and rage. Now for the game's text, which this is very weird. The smallest text in the game are the subtitles, because the tutorials actually use bigger text than the subtitle text, and they tend to have a little background, not a big deep background separated from the everything going on, but still a small amount of background that the subtitles themselves don't have. The menus also could use more of the giant amount of space they have on the screen, considering there's a lot of real estate that could be using to make the text bigger. But it's just weird how the subtitles are the smallest thing written. Even the combo number is bigger than the actual subtitles going on for cutscenes. It's just, why do you have the smaller one? I mean, I like the fact that the tutorials have bigger, easy to read text, but this is weird out where one thing is clearly getting left behind in all this and feels more thrown in than the rest, especially when everything else has more going on. I mean, it's kind of like I mentioned the earlier gripe I have with the QTE buttons being smaller towards the sides of the screen rather than being easier to see, considering you need to know what button you need to push or how to move the analog stick for the QTEs and everything. So just a very weird decision I don't understand, but okay, there's Marco Studios. Well, like I said, God of War 3 is great, and I am surprised they're gonna remake this one as well, because they're gonna remake the entire trilogy and everything. But I'm not also expecting the God of War trilogy remake to be very different, so I'm not glad that I finally got around to playing these God of War games, because I know the remake is going to be different. I don't expect they'll do the exact same thing they did in this game, especially since developers have mentioned there were some issues and stuff like God of War 2 that they felt like they could have done better. So I'm glad to take the chance now to play the original versions of the game. So I gotta say about God of War 3, alrighty then, good day.